Discourse. I am Tyler Frater alongside Richard De La Cruz, who is not here today, and Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Good evening.
It is Monday, April 8th, 2024. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse, Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse. You can support us for $2, $4, $7, $10. Get your name in the video credits, early access to our videos, access to our Discord server, and more. Richard does a once a week video game radio show, Gaming Discourse FM. That's on YouTube as well. Name change pending. We're going to change the name to something, but we don't know what yet, or Richard doesn't know what yet. But eventually, once that happens, we'll announce it and we'll get it working. But for now, go to Gaming Discourse FM. Check it out. Connor, I've been meaning to have you plug your D&D column, your once a week D&D column.
Yeah, the Lore Bard's Journal.
Yeah, 10 years. You have a PhD in being a DM.
Yeah.
So what was the latest thing you wrote about?
Kobolds and how to give your players PTSD with them.
All right. Well,
specifically TTRPG PTSD.
That sounds complicated, probably not as complicated as it sounds. Okay, so we've got games, we've got a bunch of quotes, a bunch of things we will be reading later. So if you're excited for us reading things and being mad at quotes, get ready because it's coming. But until then, Connor, what have you been playing?
Continuing through my 4th or 5th replay of Red Dead, I'm still finding stuff. 6 years later, this game isn't fair. And I started getting back into Crusader Kings 3. One funny story from that is the original character I was playing as died, his son took over, and his son was like massively stressed out and was an alcoholic. And one of the courtiers was like, hey, like an event popped up, I was like, hey, you should, stop being an alcoholic. And I was like, sure, I'll try that. And then he got so stressed out he died.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. In like 5 years of him being king. Anyway, so yeah.
I'm sorry that's happening to you. Crusader Kings, everybody.
It's Crusader fine. It's fine. A 4-year-old took over after him.
Okay, so we're good. We've righted the ship. The 4-year-old is like, ice cream every day.
It was more like Holy Wars.
Yeah, the kingdom's good to go. When a 4-year-old rules, who like they're not actually the ruler, right? Don't they have like
they get a regent?
Yeah.
And my character, the 4-year-old's regent was his older sister.
Oh, okay. So really, it's the sister who's in power until the kid comes of age or something. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sure.
And they try to manipulate it so that they can remain in power after you come of age. But there are ways to curtail that so that once you become old enough, you can kick them out of office and take over.
What an amazing game. Okay, anything else? Anything you want to add about Red Dead?
No. Oh, we beat the automatons.
I saw that, and Helldivers
Democracy
2.
Coming to a galaxy near you.
Yeah, I have not played Helldivers 2 in a couple weeks because I've been digging into other stuff, but that's cool.
It's not gonna last.
I'm sure
the game masters are brewing up something that's gonna.
I'm sure it's not gonna be a happy
us.
ending. Yeah, I know. I'm sure it's not gonna be a happy ending. Okay, so I've been playing more of Rise of the Ronin. I enjoy Rise of the Ronin. I've been able to grasp its concepts and its mechanics a little bit more, as well as dig into some of the history. I am not an expert when it comes to Japanese history at any period, but especially the 1850s. But it's interesting because there's sort of a civil, I don't know if a civil war is the correct term for it, but it's definitely a major flashpoint in like two broad groups. The anti-shogunate group, for lack of a better term, and the sort of pro-shogunate, and their differing views on what Japan should do going forward, as Japan has now sort of encountered this world that seems like technologically they're far superior. So what do you do? How do you handle that? Are you going to be, people are afraid that they're going to be strong-armed into a world that is becoming increasingly industrialized, and a world that is increasingly ruled by colonial powers, which isn't great. So Japan has to figure out what to do there. And sort of the anti-shogunate side, I guess, and this is overgeneralization, this is really broad, I'm not a PhD in history, but, their idea is isolation, cut off the colonial powers do all that. Pro-shogunate is more not, make friends with the West, but sort of placate the West, keep them at arm's length, keep them happy so that Japan can sort of reinforce itself without it coming to any kind of violence or falling too far behind or something like that. And I am not, once again, I am, disclaimer, I'm not a history expert, but I do find it interesting because this is one of those historical moments where it doesn't seem like either, and it happened in the 1850s, it doesn't seem like either side has like a real moral high ground. Because both the shogunate obviously is not a great form of government because a warlord, and the other side, they don't want to make democracy, they want to reinstall the emperor. So it's like you have two forms of similar governments going at it.
Pick a dictator.
Kind of, yeah. So it's like neither side is going for something great, as in, something like the American Civil War or World War II, where all sides of the conflict were clearly extremely flawed, but there was clearly a worse side. The Axis powers were clearly worse than the Allies, but that did not mean the Allies and Churchill and anybody were like these moral paragons whatsoever. But so that's interesting how it picks through that. I would be curious to see how somebody who I don't know, someone from like a Japanese person would react to it, because their take on it is going to be different, because I'm sure that's kind of history you probably learn growing up, maybe in school, I don't know. Similar to how you learn about the American Civil War here, and how your perspective on that may be different because you grew up in America. So I think that would be interesting. But the combat's still pretty good. The game is both too easy and too hard at the same time. It's really weird. I can't figure out how to parry. It's kind of unclear, but I have not gotten into a fight yet where I've been dying a lot. Maybe it's just because I've gotten used to like the Souls-like combat, where I'm actually playing at like a relatively high level, so I don't have to worry about it. But yeah, the combat's never clean for me. I always miss a bunch of parries and I have to take a bunch of health pills, but I'm never to the point where it's like I have to redo a fight or anything a bunch of times. I'm usually pretty... I usually like get in and out of missions in one shot, kind of a thing.
Dodge around your enemies in a circle until they do their big attack, and then hit them in the back. That's usually what works.
In Rise of Ronin, the dodge isn't super effective all the time. Blocking is, and there's different things you can try blocking to like learn the opponent's rhythm of their attacks. So that way it's easier to parry. But then depending on which weapons you use, parries come in different styles. Like I use double swords, and there are parries where one sword and the other sword goes. So it's like it's one button press, but it's a move set of two moves almost.
Okay.
And it feels like I'll parry if an enemy attacks twice, and their second attack happens in between those two swords, they'll land that attack. So I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do there, or if I'm seeing it correctly.
I think the best strategy would be to just sell out the Americans and get guns.
There are pistols in the game. There are obviously no, but and the game does say that some attacks may be difficult to parry or impossible to parry. So those are things you have to learn. And enemies do have a lot of different attack styles because I think it's like every enemy, the weapons that the enemies use are all weapons that you can use, and all the attacks that they have, you have. That's that kind of thing. So it's like if you see a boss, well, maybe not all enemies, because there are enemies that are like the super big bosses with giant clubs and you can't carry those. But in terms of normal enemies, I have seen attacks and then I have like unlocked those attacks with those weapons later on. So it kind of feels like once you know those attacks, you kind of know what to expect. But I'm still really enjoying it. Yeah, I don't know if the game needed to be open world. It may have been better as like a linear. It does that thing where the open world is big and you can run around and go over here and fight some dudes, collect some things, whatever. But then when
but there's no real substance.
I mean, it's just sort of a basic open world. You run around and do stuff. There's no there's nothing I think super notable about it. It's efficient, it's good, it's beautiful, it works. There's nothing bad about it. But when I think about, I don't know, open worlds that are really there's nothing new about it there. It's a very standard like open world. You've got a grappling hook. You get on top of buildings, very Assassin's Creed. You've got wings so you can fly. So think Horizon or Breath of the Wild. But there's nothing in the game that makes it like, oh, this is an interesting way to use an open world or go throughout an open world or whatever. It's all very standard. And then it funnels players into those individualized missions, those bespoke missions where it's like, okay, now you're playing Dark Souls because you have to make it through this like mission where you can't leave, so you can't you're sort of funneled into a linear situation there. And so yeah, I think they kind of, I don't know if an open world they really needed it, but it's still fun and enjoyable, and it is nice to be able to approach enemies from different angles, so you can do like stealth and whatnot. But yeah, like when I think about Elden Ring and how amazing Elden Ring's open world was, you had all the different environments, all the different hidden things, the secret things. In Rise of the Ronin, it's all just a beautiful Japanese countryside that you run through and kill bandits in, which is fine, but it's just nothing that spectacular or engaging. But there's room for games like that. Not every game needs to be Elden Ring. Not every game needs to be Tears of the Kingdom, where it reinvents how you move across an open world. So it's not that I don't enjoy it. It's just that I don't expect it to be, anything more than that. And what was the other? I played a bunch of other stuff. I played Project Zomboid for the first time.
I was about to ask, did you play Project Zomboid?
I did. I enjoyed it. I played on a friend of mine server, and they had the server modded. I had alien colonial marine armor on, although I don't think it was that effective. But Project Zomboid's really interesting. Marine. Yeah, don't talk about that. Project Zomboid's interesting. I know it's been popular. I know it's been out for a long time, but I never got into it. But it really is like a simulator. And it's one of those cool things where you have to discover so much of the world and you have to survive. So there are literal expeditions you go on where it's like you have a safe house that's stocked with food and stuff. But if you want to go 2 miles, not 2, but I don't know. If you want to go really far away,
the next town over,
you have to get in a car. You have to bring food and ammo, and then once you get there, you have to you have to search for resources. You have to fuel up the car, scout it out, all that stuff, and that's really cool. And yeah, to do that, you have to have a certain level of commitment to it, I think, because it's inconvenient in a sim way, right? In the same way that Squad is inconvenient, but Squad is inconvenient in the sense that it has to be that way to build up being a military simulator. But yeah, so I was enjoying that. I started Lies of P. Don't know how far I'm going to get into that for now because I've got other stuff. I'm still playing Far Cry 6. So yeah, I'm juggling a bunch of stuff, and then Pacific Drive comes out tomorrow, so the physical edition. Yeah. So I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm gonna have to power through and figure out, and then we'll see. I think that's basically all that I wanted to talk about. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. Oh, new. What are the Game Pass thing? Warbond, the new Warbond coming out for Helldivers 2, which features the grenade pistol.
Interesting. Okay.
A grenade launcher pistol.
Can't wait for Helldivers.
Can't wait for all the team kills.
Can't wait for Helldivers to die to that sucker.
One thing I will say real quick, I found out is that there's the tooltip about making sure that your angles are right when you're shooting, because sometimes stuff will deflect. Make sure you have the angles right, because turns out the recoilless rifle rounds will deflect.
Oh yeah, I've seen them deflect.
And they will hit allies.
And they somehow deflect and go. They don't
directly towards your allies.
They don't tumble. They don't tumble or crash. It's like they spin 180 degrees and launch themselves back somehow. It's like they spin around and reignite a jet and don't lose any momentum or velocity at all. Yeah. When you shoot, because Chargers have that that armor. So when you shoot at Chargers, they have the little slots in their arms that you can get in and do some damage.
Yeah.
But if you'd miss, it's just doing, let bounce,
Yeah,
bounce.
I ricocheted 3 rounds off the Strider factory, the big AT-AT looking automaton
Yeah.
enemy, and then we just called a 380 on it
There
just
you
to
go.
take care of it. Yeah,
That's
took
usually
us out too, but we took it out.
And the 380 is better now, correct?
It's really good at killing allies.
That was
I don't know what it is about it, but every time a buddy of mine uses it, one of them will always hit me directly.
Yeah, I haven't played it in a few weeks, but I do hope that they figure out how to make other call-ins more viable in Helldivers 2. Because it felt like after I unlocked the carpet bomb one, the precision bomb one that drops in a few heavy bombs, and the auto cannon, there's just nothing else that I needed. And maybe on, again, higher difficulties, but just felt like the shield pack was one that I know that on higher difficulties against the automatons you need. But I kind of want I want things to be useful where I don't have to play on impossible difficulty. Like, let me have call-ins that are more useful on some of the lower difficulties.
The ballistic shield backpack, super useful in most situations. If you have it on your back while you're running with your primary out, it will still deflect rounds that are being shot at you, and it will deflect hunters, like their little tongue attack.
Sure.
Those things like suck. That. Oh yeah, absolutely. And then, if you pull out your secondary, if you have the defender, the SMG, you can have it out forward facing while you're charging into enemies. So
how does that work? If it takes a lot of damage, do you have to call in another one, or?
I haven't had one get destroyed yet.
Wow. Okay.
I've lost it because I got killed and then I couldn't find it. Had to call in a new one, but I haven't had one get destroyed yet.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll have to try that out. Okay, we'll hit the ad and we'll get to the news. Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server. Okay, so we're going to discuss this report by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau about in-game economies. It's a fairly long report, but not super long, but definitely long, definitely detailed. It gets into things that we've discussed on the show a lot. So I think if you're someone that follows microtransactions, if you discuss it a lot and stuff like that, it's stuff that you've probably heard of or experienced. But I think the report is more out there, namely because it's the department's or the bureau's job, but also because I don't know how much this sort of information is generic or how much it's general, how much the general public is aware of this kind of stuff going on in video games. So we're going to discuss it. There's 3 key findings in the report. I'm just going to read straight from the report here. 3 key findings. Quote, gaming assets flow in and out of gaming marketplaces in a variety of ways and can have immense value. To leverage that value, financial products and services have begun entering gaming in the form of payment processing, money transmission, and even loans. With the rise in value of gaming assets, there have also been increased reports of users losing access to gaming assets through hijacking attempts, account theft, scams, and unauthorized transactions. Yet operators of gaming and virtual worlds do not appear to provide the kinds of consumer protections that apply to traditional banking and payment systems. Gaming publishers can collect a host of surveillance data on their users. This includes localization data, social media data, and behavioral interactions, such as how a player responds to personalized incentives. There is a risk that gamers may be harmed when their data is sold, bought, and traded between companies, including for purposes outside of gameplay, end quote. Companies take biometric data on players. This is something that we understand. This is something that social media sites do a lot. And then the report also talked about dynamic odds, which we've heard about in things like loot boxes, where if person A and person B are both playing a game, person A spends no money on the game, person B spends a ton of money, person A will have a better chance at getting a special item from a loot box because the game does not expect them to spend money, so it'll throw them a special item, while person B is going to get items of lesser quality because the game knows that they continuously spend money, so they don't want them to get the things that they're trying to get right away, or else they would stop spending money. At least that's the theory behind it. And I don't know if, off the top of my head, I'm sure there have been games that have been caught or maybe even went public using those kinds of odds. I don't know off the top of my head if I don't know off the top of my head of any big ones. So
I think it's fair to assume, and this is just going to be an assumption and throwing in every legality for like allegedly, probably EA was accused of it at least once.
I'm sure they've all thought about it. I'm sure every single video game company that makes more than
does loot boxes,
that makes more than $50 a year has thought about it. So yeah. Okay. So broad takeaways. I'll let you share some stuff. I know that if you listen to us all the time or if you follow games really closely, this stuff isn't new, but I do think it is interesting that this kind of report is talking about it in a context where it's not necessarily written for people who play video games, but it's more written for people who may be unaware of this stuff. So yeah, go ahead.
I want any executive that enables the use of biometric data to be, used on people playing games or be collected from people playing games. I want, a full report on why they need that biometric data. And if it doesn't go anywhere past, hoping sales, then they need to, one, be fired, and two, have all that biometric data erased. Because there's really no purpose of it other than, just signing in. And that shouldn't be accessible to other companies. That should be in a closed system between me and the software I'm interfacing with. It should stop there. It shouldn't be accessible outside of there. So I'd really want to know, one, what biometric data they're collecting, and two, why they have that data. What purpose does it serve them?
Well, I'm sure it's targeted ads, because this report was not just about console gaming. Obviously, it's about gaming in general. So the topic is really broad, because when you say video games, what do you mean? Connor, if I were to tell you, what do you think is the best, give me your top 10 games of all time, you would automatically go to your favorite or the best or something, right? Where if I told some executive somewhere, give me your top 10 games of all time, they'd be like, oh, Candy Crush, GTA 5. Like, they would go to games that...
No, they would say, why are you talking to me? I'm calling security.
Yeah, that generate profit or something like that, right? So their context is different. So it's like games have become such a broad discussion that when we have these conversations, I think sometimes we forget that they're talking about the mobile market as much as they're talking about consoles and even PC gaming. And yeah, so I think biometric data a lot of the time is just going to relate to targeted ads, which is the same thing that social media uses.
That's what I'm getting at.
And so it's like you play, I'm not sure which games. They didn't specify, I don't think, in the report anywhere games use. They may have specified. I don't remember. But I totally wouldn't be surprised if it's just biometric data that's harvested to give you targeted ads somehow in a video game. And I know that Apple's app transparency, this is something that we haven't talked about on the show, but Apple a couple years ago did this app tracking transparency policy. Was a new policy they enacted, which curtailed an app's ability on an iPhone to like communicate data to other apps. I forget exactly what it was. Facebook didn't like it. Facebook really disliked it, which tells you that it may have been a good idea. Because the idea was it was a privacy thing where apps couldn't share data, right? And communicate and like send data to other apps to, again, help with targeted ads. So I think maybe that's what this is, or at least that's partially what this is talking about. I wish I knew I had a better picture of that in my head. It's Apple's app tracking transparency or something like that. And I think in the couple years since they announced it, they have loosened the reins a little bit. But I know that when it was first announced, it was bad. Certain companies didn't like it because the policy would hurt targeted ads, because the data that they use for targeted ads tracks you and stuff like that. Yeah, I do want to make, because if Richard were here, I know what he would say. There was a good, about one specific thing, there was a Good Morning America story about all this stuff, and it showed a kid and a family, and the kid spent like $4,000 in game, something like that, right? And the family didn't know, and it was all on the family's credit card, and the family eventually got a refund for that. And I know if Richard were here, and I don't blame him, and I agree with him, because Richard's position and his spot as like someone who works in retail, customer facing, has always been, people don't always know what they're buying. A kid wants V-Bucks, the parent just buys them V-Bucks, right? The parents don't always understand what this stuff is, or how the system works, or anything like that. And so for Richard, I think, I don't want to speak for him because he's not here, he can't defend himself or anything, but I think that's a point he would bring up, and it is one that I agree with, about, I don't know, educating and trying to get across exactly what's going on in these games, and also in live service economies, and also that I think a lot of these issues are purposeful. The report talks about obfuscation, where it's like they obfuscate, live service economies will obfuscate the value of things to keep you from thinking critically about them, right? So they don't want you to know that a skin costs $20. So it's, oh, this is worth 10,000 blue crystals, right?
Yeah.
But you're not thinking about, well, how many does that? You don't do the math in your head. So they do it at like weird exchange rates and stuff like that to obfuscate the value proposition, because you're probably paying way too much for these things, and people don't realize it. And so that's a really sketchy thing that live service companies do, that this report talks about. And I don't think, even across games, I don't think we talk about that enough. And I don't think this report will make much of a difference. But whenever it comes to complaining about live service games, it's something I want to harp on. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
No, I was going to go into the smoke and mirror show that they do to make you not realize how much you're spending. But I think you covered that fairly well.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else. I could repeat a bunch of stuff that I've said in the past about live service economies. There's always the executives have a few go-to arguments in defense of them. If people didn't want it, they wouldn't buy it. Shit like that. None of which is good. And I think it's always about, can you afford to build a better industry? Can you afford to make some of these products, some of these games, without the additional spending? I think you could. And can you afford to do all that without the obfuscation, without the biometric data? I think you probably could. So it's not about keeping a sustainable business. It's about growth. It's about shareholders and bullshit like that. And yeah, that's what that's the world the industry has created. And I don't trust our government to like,
so that's got to be the cold open
to understand, like, I don't know, maybe this is naive of me, but I don't know, if the average age of a US senator is like 639 years old, so I don't
lowballing it there.
I find it difficult to understand that senators would have an idea on how intrusive this stuff is and how it works and how best to regulate it if you actually wanted to regulate it, which I don't think it's a great idea. I really wish the industry would self-regulate. I don't think it's going to happen though. But yeah, yeah, okay, I think that's all I want to say. Are we ready to move on?
Let's go.
Okay, so Newzoo released their apparently second annual, I don't remember last year's, but apparently second annual report on PC gaming and console gaming. Newzoo is a market research firm similar to Circana. I had to pull that one out of my head. Circana. I'm going to read their executive summary here, and then we'll get into some of the interesting bits that they had to say about games industry economics. Let me pull this up. Okay, so they have Newzoo has 3 pillars in their executive summary of this report. 1, the market will grow at modest rates, the games industry market. 2, gamers will clock in fewer playtime hours going forward. And 3, competition is fierce, but opportunities do exist. So going through the first one, the market will grow at modest rates in the coming year, or years, I guess, maybe. I'm not sure exactly what time frame they're working on. Last year was massive for new game releases, but the overall market is slowing down. New player growth will flatten out in the coming years. There we go. Console gaming will be the main growth driver, which I think is interesting. Games as a platform's prevalence means every new game will have to contend with Fortnite and Roblox. Number 2, gamers will clock in fewer playtime hours. Playtime has shrunk since its peak in 2021 and is trending downward. Games that have been out for 6 or more years are capturing over half of playtime, and that share is increasing. Fewer publishers are scooping up more player engagement and revenue, though players are still seeking out a diverse array of games. The barriers between PC, console, and mobile gaming are coming down. And number 3, competition is fierce, but opportunities do exist. Many breakout titles from the last 2 years share success factors, giving insight into viable gameplay and storytelling strategies. Player growth in emerging markets is more promising than in established ones, and there are still many trend-chasing gamers out there ready to jump on the next big thing. So diving into this a little bit, a few more tidbits from the report. They say, Newzoo says you don't need to stand out if gamers know your IPs. Remakes and remasters remain a viable way to use nostalgia to capture player interest. Film and TV adaptations can increase the Game of Origin's monthly active users at launch. This seems obvious, but I think in the context of declining playtimes and stuff like that, it's more relevant, especially with we've had, I don't know about the Halo TV series, but Last of Us, Mario movie, etc., etc. So we've had like successful video game adaptations that I think have increased interest. And then this was one that we talked about that they said in the executive summary. In the next few years, player growth in PC and console gaming will come from emerging markets rather than established markets. Newzoo says emerging markets are Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, Central and Southern Asia, and Southeast Asia. I wanted to talk about our takeaways from that, and then I wanted to talk about something else and read a quote from the report. But for now, did you have any thoughts from what we just talked about? There was a lot of stuff there, but I thought a lot of it was interesting because it's stuff we've said before.
Well, with the emerging markets, I think that that's just going to lend to hopefully overall a better industry as more people get into it, more indie teams start popping up, and you get more people competing to take that limelight, and that level of competition, not 6 conglomerate companies competing against each other, but hundreds of thousands of companies, smaller companies working against each other and with each other, will breed excellence. Will make some really great games come out of it, and we won't get the same 8 games coming out of Ubisoft every year and the same 2 games coming out of EA every year.
it is interesting to wonder how new markets will affect game design and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
No idea if we'll see anything that dramatic or how big of a pull those markets will have. But yeah, that especially with something like Saudi Arabia, which is, I think partially we have an emerging market there because the sovereign wealth fund has decided we're going to spend a ton of money to cleanse our reputation as being a horrible as having a horrible human rights record. So we'll pay for a esports team or something like that, or we'll crash Embracer into the ground by backing out of a $2 billion deal in the last minute. But yeah, there are a few things that I think are interesting. One is that they sort of talk about the cannibalization of multiple live services, and I think that's interesting because we've talked about this in the past, that people do not jump between live services all the time. So if you have a giant live service, you're going to have a player base, and that player base is finite, and it's not going to take over the world. You have people that are going to play COD. You have people that are going to play CSGO, Dota. You have people that are going to play Roblox and Fortnite, and those are the two big ones, Roblox and Fortnite, right? So if you're a studio, if you're a company, let's say you're Sony, and you've got a bajillion live service games you're working on, even though you've seen that that's not your strength, and you're not even sure if the market really wants that. I would argue it doesn't. But when you see a report like this, what does it tell you? Because if you're making a live service, and live services are all about long-term monetization and retention, and you know that it's difficult to get that because you're up against the Fortnites and the Robloxes, well, then what's the point of making a live service game? If you know that you're going to have to compete with these behemoths, instead of making a finite experience, like a single-player game or something, that has a beginning and an end, it's not forever, going on forever. It doesn't have to have recurrent spending or monthly active users or anything like that. And then people that are on those services will be willing to hop off, play a finite experience, and then go back to their comfort game or whatever, right? I think that's a better strategy. I think that makes more sense, but that's not what companies are doing, and that frustrates me. It frustrates me because I think it's somewhat obvious. When it comes to, I don't know, we've talked about this within the context of like Xbox and everybody. When it comes to industry growth, if the growth is not there, maybe we shouldn't be trying to force growth into the equation.
Yeah.
So Phil Spencer has said they have no choice. If they don't grow, Xbox is going to be sold off. All the investors are going to get out of there. And it's like, okay, so then your only option is to, force a square peg through a round hole then. Okay, like, good luck, I guess. If that's really your only option, if that's really the only thing the industry can do, if it's really as simple as that, then fine. But, maybe growth like the industry wants just isn't possible because there is a finite amount of people who want to play video games. And I think part of the problem is that the sectors where there has been most growth, and the industry doesn't really know how to handle right now, like on a larger scale. Like, I don't know if EA has put out mobile games, but they still have all these studios making, single player or premium games and stuff like that. So they don't really know how to handle transitioning straight to mobile only development, right? Which I think a lot of these companies might actually do if they had the option to just flip a switch and change the universe to fit that. So yeah, I don't know, maybe capitalize on making good games and making a sustainable market than trying to grow a market that is not showing signs of growing. And its large growth in the past few years was artificial because it came after the pandemic when everybody was inside. Yeah. See, it's like some of these companies act like that was such a big surprise that the numbers dipped because there was a pandemic bump. And that makes me so angry, because if a guy sitting in a room like me can tell you in the middle of the pandemic that these numbers are not going to be sustainable, then a guy that's the executive, some random jabroni who's an executive of some stupid fucking game company should be able to say, hey, these numbers aren't going to be sustainable, so we have to act responsibly here. We shouldn't go out and spend a ton of money so that the game industry crashes when the bubble slightly bursts from the pandemic. Did you have something you were going to say?
I was gonna say, if these two jabronis can figure it out, you guys should. But you said jabronis before I could.
Oh, okay, yeah, jabroni. It's a good word. Jabroni.
It's such a good word.
Underrated word. Another thing that I thought was interesting was remakes, because they specifically said, that was a quote up here, you don't need to stand out if gamers know your IPs. Remakes and remasters remain a viable way to use nostalgia to capture player interest. Okay, I think that's interesting because the drive for remakes, I don't think, is powered by nostalgia. And I'm not necessarily saying they're saying that. Maybe it's just a quibble with one of the headlines in their reports, because I don't think the main driving force behind remakes is nostalgia. And I think if there are executives out there that think it's nostalgia, then what they have is a comprehensively flawed understanding of video games, probably because they don't play them. And I don't think any of them actually do. But so, like, there is some nostalgia baked in, I'm sure, but I think the larger reason behind remakes is because games that were good 20 years ago, their elements still work today, but the problem is, to play them, you have to have a PS2 or something, and then you're playing at 30 frames a second. You're playing with old controllers, whatever, right? You're not playing at modern resolutions, modern frame rates. You don't have the modern usability, the seamlessness, the conveniences. Exactly.
Consoles.
That entire thing, right? So Resident Evil 4, the basic elements that made Resident Evil 4 or Dead Space really good in 2008 and 2005, I think, is when it came out. Resident Evil 4 came out. Those basic elements still work today. The way the games are structured, the way the games are paced, the combat, the style, all that stuff doesn't mean they can't be modernized in certain ways, but all those things still work today, right? So if you have an older game that people really love and the structure of it still works today, then why not remake it? So it's not so much just about nostalgia. I think it's about those things still work, but the technology behind those older games just doesn't work as well today, right? Because it's on older systems. And I think the lesson you should learn from that is you don't have to make there are ideas out there to make games. Like, why hasn't there been another Full Spectrum Warrior type game? How come no one has done another Brothers in Arms? Where is a tactical shooter like Brothers in Arms? Because that game would work today. A remastered Brother in Arms that's been modernized, that foundation would work today. And so I think with Resident Evil, somewhere along the line, they thought, you know what? A Resident Evil would still work today. A much more like classically styled Resident Evil would still work. And it did. Resident Evil 2 sold extremely well. I wish I could draw more examples, but that doesn't always mean everything's going to work. Assassin's Creed Mirage, I did not play it, but I read a lot of reviews, and I know that the Assassin's Creed Mirage was trimmed down and simplified, but I think some people thought it was a little too simple, a little too close to the original Assassin's Creed, so maybe it's not always a home run, it's not always a guarantee, but it's not about nostalgia. That's the point I'm trying to make here. It's not just nostalgia, right? I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of video games and video games as an art form and a technology, and that's what happens when all you can see are numbers and logos and franchises. That's all you can see and perceive, instead of playing them and feeling the games and understanding what goes into them and what makes them good and fun and engaging and blah blah blah. Connor, you were gonna go ahead.
I was gonna say, just on the topic of Assassin's Creed Mirage, I think they went sorry, excuse me. I think they went through the nostalgia in the wrong direction, because when people talk about the early Assassin's Creed games, the majority of the conversation is 2, and I think they went more towards 1 for gameplay. It's I think that was just a misunderstanding of where the actual appreciation of the original content was. Yes, Assassin's Creed was needed to be made for 2 to be as good as it is, but that doesn't mean that it's the one that should be replicated on.
Yeah. So yeah, and I'm not. I haven't played it. I would like to, but
Same.
But that's the distinction, right? People didn't want Resident Evil 4 because of nostalgia. It's much more complicated.
It's knowing the industry versus knowing the business.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of.
We keep coming back to that.
Yeah, we keep coming back to that sort of weird distinction. Okay, this was another thing. I wanted to read a quote here again from the Newzoo report on PC console gaming. Here we go. Many of the breakout games released in the last 12 months shared success factors. And this is them talking about breakout games in 2023. Quote, only a few games can leverage a massive marketing budget or pre-existing cultural significance. You can find common success factors between hit games to understand what contributed to their unique impact. These factors never tell the whole story, but they help define commonalities between breakout titles, like the 7 and the Table. We'll talk about the Table in a second. Each of these titles rebuilt familiar core gameplay loops into compelling experiences, bringing in fans of multiple genres and franchises. Developer support and community building are also important, even for the single-player Baldur's Gate 3. Many went through early access, or are still in it, showing a willingness to incorporate player feedback. These games all remain the core focus of their respective development teams. Social elements and virality play a large part in many breakout games' success. There's often entertainment value beyond the core gameplay. Every game here also had immense quality and depth, cutting no corners to give players the richest possible experience, end quote. Okay, the games in the Table that they use as examples are Baldur's Gate 3, BattleBit Remastered, Pal World, Lethal Company, The Finals, Ready or Not, and Helldivers 2, right? And they're not talking about they're talking about a calendar year, I guess, not necessarily just 2023, because Pal World and Helldivers 2 came out this year, obviously. So, all right. So what I thought was interesting about that was they kind of say what we were just talking about. So they say familiar gameplay loops, which is something similar to what we were talking about. So like BattleBit, what BattleBit did was it just did Battlefield. It just did sort of old school classic Battlefield, right? Which we haven't really had, at least on a large scale. And people miss that. It doesn't mean they want Battlefield 1942 copy and pasted, but the certain structure and pacing of classic Battlefield has been missing for a long time. I think people want that. DICE has tried different things with Battlefield that people haven't been fans of. BattleBit comes in, does relatively simple Battlefield structure, and becomes super popular, right? So I think that's an example of what we were talking about, where it's not that people are nostalgic for something, it's that there's a certain structure or elements that work a long time ago that can work today, and you can capitalize on that if you decide to make a game in that way. I thought it was interesting that they said cutting no corners to give players the richest possible experience. The Finals used AI. So I don't know, that seemed like cutting corners. BattleBit had a really simple visuals to it. It looked like Roblox there. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there. But the larger point I want to get to here is that all these games were successful for a bunch of different reasons, and success in the games industry is really difficult. But also, all these games are good. Maybe not the Finals. I don't know. I haven't played it. And I'm not a fan of Ready or Not. But the large majority of them are just good games. They may not be original. They may not be perfect. But they're just good games, right? So it's like, I don't think you can explain. There isn't a unified theory for why all these games are successful, right? So if you're somebody who's looking to like invest in the games industry and you don't know a whole lot about video games, I think you have to understand that it's not about checking certain boxes and hitting all these, prerequisites that you need to hit to have a hit game. Some things are just, they're ephemeral, or they come down to like a gimmick. Pal World had Pokemon in it,
Yeah.
So it's like, that's what made it go viral, and that's what made it so popular. Lethal Company was this funny game that you played with your friends, and streamers made it popular. Um, so that is due to that's what Lethal Company can think to its success. And Baldur's Gate 3, yeah, and it's correct in pointing out the early access and certain economic context that Baldur's Gate 3 comes from, and how that's not necessarily replicable from other studios because other studios have different economic pressures that they have to deal with. So it's like, I don't know. If you want to explain success in the games industry, I think it's too complicated to have a unified theory showing like, well, here's different reasons, because there's a bajillion reasons these games are successful, and some of these reasons are not being taken advantage of. Again, like, why hadn't EA made a Battlefield like BattleBit, a simple Battlefield? They could have done it, they just hadn't. And it's because EA is Electronic Arts and DICE is DICE. They just haven't been able to do it for whatever fucking reason. And BattleBit comes along and does it, and it's fine. Do you have anything you would like to say?
There was something, but I had a coughing fit and everything left my head.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. We can move on.
Okay, let's
go. Or continue.
No, what's going on in Roblox?
Roblox are totally not exploiting children.
Okay.
Eurogamer's Chris Tapsell spoke with Roblox studio head Stefano Corazza at GDC and asked about Roblox's reputation as exploitative. Stefano Corazza responded, I don't know, you can say this for a lot of things, right? Like you can say, oh, we're exploiting, child labor, right? Or you can say we're offering people anywhere in the world the capability to get a job, even like an income. So I can be like 15 years old in Indonesia, living in a slum, and then now, just with a laptop, I can create something, make money, and then sustain my life. There's always the flip side of that. Then you go broad and democratized, and in this case, also with a younger audience. I mean, our average developer is in their 20s, but of course, there's people that are teenagers, and we have hired some teenagers that had millions of players on the platform. For them, hearing from their experience, they didn't feel like they were exploited. They felt like, oh, oh my God, this is the biggest gift. All of a sudden, I can create something. I had millions of users. I made so much money. I could retire. So I focus more on the amount of money that we distribute every year to creators, which is now getting close to like $1 billion, which is phenomenal. 2 words, phenomenal. Roblox sent a statement to Eurogamer a few days later clarifying the company does not employ minors, and said that a recent survey of the 6,500 creators most ranked fun over monetization for their motivation for creating.
So this was
this was a really elaborate way of saying, listen, guys, we're exploiting children, but they don't think they're being exploited, so we're not exploiting them.
Yeah. Hey, listen, these kids are so dumb. they're happy to be exploited. What, are you gonna be mad at me for being happy to exploit child labor? I'll tell you what.
Are you gonna be mad at me for exploiting some 15-year-old in an Indonesian slum with just a laptop?
Let me make a culturally insensitive comparison here. I know this kid in a third world country, shithole, and this kid makes tons of money on Roblox. Isn't that great? Aren't I amazing? So this has got to be like one of the greatest quotes of all time, and it's just so revealing. Because yes, Roblox. Go ahead.
This avoids all of like the the PR talking points. Yes. This is the bullet point for what not to say that you get at a PR presentation.
Yes.
All of this is just so out of pocket, none of this was prepared. He was caught off guard by this question. You can tell just by the number of like filler words he's using to create gaps so you can think about his answer that he's just word vomiting out and just shitting all over the place with.
This is like Tony Soprano when he gets mad and guilt tripped about being in the mob. It's like, I'll tell you what, I am in the mob, okay? Yeah, and we make millions of dollars. So get over it. Like this is him just losing his cool and just putting the finger out there and telling Meadow to shut the hell up or something like that. Man, okay, so
sorry, I love this opening. You could say we're exploiting, child labor, right? Or You could say we're not doing that, and we're providing opportunities.
Picture this: some poor son of a bitch in a different country, some poor slob in some horseshit country. I don't know, Scandinavia. And picture this, okay? Oh my god! Oh man! So, I just one of the things I would like to point out is Roblox is not out to give people opportunities. Okay.
No.
It's not why Roblox exists. If every single creator on Roblox, because there are teams, there's not just like kids creating, there are teams. If every single creator on Roblox created in Roblox for the rest of their lives and never went on to do other things outside of the Roblox ecosystem, Roblox would not give a shit. Because all Roblox wants is that creativity inside their world, inside their ecosystem, to harness it, to exploit it, instead of you going out and taking those skills and having Steam exploited by selling it on Steam. They want things to happen there. So it's like, you know what? This idea that they give people opportunity is such horseshit. Because if it were really about,
it's not people that are giving opportunities, it's teenagers that they're hiring, but not hiring, legally not hiring.
But legally not hiring, but you know, it's mostly over the 20s, whatever. Some poor slob in Ohio, you know, some shit place like Arizona, you know.
Some schmuck in Kanakistan.
Yeah. Some piece of shit in Manhattan is playing Roblox, right? This kid's
some
the
jabroni
worst.
in San Francisco.
This kid's the worst. He's a fucking piece of shit, but he's playing Roblox, and he's gonna retire. He's gonna retire off his red light, green light game he made in Roblox. I'm sorry, no.
He's gonna make hundreds of pennies.
He's gonna make so many pennies. You know, he's not gonna know what to do with all these fucking pennies. Man, that's okay. So
he's gonna roll up to his friends and be like, "I've got tens of dollars.
I've got tens of Robux," which because exchange rates are obfuscated, I think comes out to like 35 cents. I don't remember. So yeah, if this were egalitarian, if they really gave a shit about providing opportunities and stuff like that, there would be off ramps outside of Roblox. It would be easier to cash in the money that you make. You would get larger cuts. So this is bullshit. This is such a revealing, these people are fucking psychopaths, right? It's such a revealing like look into the mind of somebody who has to save face and speak for a company that has decided child labor is going to be one of its main revenue stream, maybe the only revenue stream. And
it's
man,
not
that
child
sucks.
labor if we don't pay them.
Or if we say and make up some piece of shit in Kentucky somewhere, you know, some horrible child that nobody loves in Canada living in a piece of shit apartment. But don't worry.
They got Roblox.
They got Roblox. And this is the same exact thing. This was the same exact thing that like Axie Infinity was about, right? Was this idea that you could do Web3 games. You could have it as a job. You can make money playing games. Oh my God. Without, you know, and obviously Web3 is a little bit different of an animal, but it's the same thing where it's like, it's couched in this idea of opportunity and making money. But all it is exploitation. That's all it is. And it's not really about helping those people or building skills or anything like that. And, you know, Roblox is not some ecosystem that, what am I trying to say here? It's not... Roblox is confined within its own bubble. So things get popular in Roblox and then more games are made like that because it's not about making good stuff as much as it is about making viral stuff or chasing trends, right? So it has all the problems of modern commercialization and modern content, but it's undiluted. It's pure because you're already in an ecosystem where the money that you make goes through layers. You can't just get the money that you're paid. So all those drivers that usually push content creation into low effort bullshit, content mills, trend chasing, all that bullshit that exists in the wider world exists in Roblox ecosystem. but at a higher rate, right? Because it's a closed system and it's all about going to where the people are rather than flourishing, rather than letting your creative side think of something. And that's not to say there isn't any creativity. I'm sure there's tons of awesome stuff. I'm sure there's tons of awesome stuff in Fortnite, but the point is not to, to expand the bounds of human creativity and human endeavor and art. It's about, this 13-year-old kid could either learn how to make a game in Unreal or Epic, or can make it within Roblox. And if we can reel that kid in, he's going to be making us money. That's all it's about. So this is such a bullshit, horrible thing to say. And so, yeah, whatever your name is, Stefan Corazza, fuck you. Like, is there anything else you would like to say?
God, there's just so much wrong with this statement. I want them to give us the number for the, like, not close to, I want the exact, like, to the cent number of money they've given out versus the money they've raked in for that. I want to see what that ratio is.
Oh, I'm sure we could find it. They gave out like a ton of money to creators, but we have to remember that it's not like that money is distributed. It's not like it's like saying, I don't know, how much money did the 6 biggest YouTubers make last year? I'm sure they made a ton of fucking money, but it's like, that doesn't mean that, and that's not.
Well, no, what I'm saying is I want to see how much they're distributing versus their overall revenue, how much they're siphoning off of that.
Oh, yeah, and how much
and
those
with
people,
all the money that they're just making to show the disparity, that they aren't this egalitarian company that's like, we're developing communities, we're giving opportunity to people that can't afford opportunities. They're just exploiting people, and they're putting it in a nice kid-friendly package.
Yeah, I don't know what the ratio is, but I'm gonna assume that it's not. They're making more. I'm gonna go ahead and assume.
I would say 10-1 would be generous.
That they have the bag and they're walking away with it. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so Roblox, according to whatever this guy's fucking name is,
Stefano Corazza.
Stefano. And we're gonna call him first name. Just like with Eves, right? No longer do we go first name, last name. No honorifics. Fuck that. We're going to call you Stefano.
Well, no. Eves and Stefano both share the same surname now, which is Jabroni.
Yeah,
Stefano Jabroni.
The official
Eves Jabroni.
And this puts Stefano Corazza in the lead for the most annoying game executive of 2024. It's going to be close. We still have all year for Yves Jamote to say something. Oh no, he said quadruple A. Never mind, he's in the running too, so it's gonna be a close one.
He almost called it triple A, but then he had to double. Yves
Jamote's the GOAT. As soon as the year starts, he's like, "What's the most annoying thing I can say?" Quadruple A for Skull and Bones. That's what I'm gonna say. And of course, the investors from Wells Fargo were like, "Oh, okay," because they don't know anything about fucking video games. So anyway, okay. We don't have Richard, so we don't have tidbits. Connor, is there anything? You don't have a tidbit, do you?
No. I was going to try to make a joke about the quote, but I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse, Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse. We'll see you next week.
Bye.